gift for which he seeks to show appreciation. He's being polite. For while claiming to agree with his correspondent, Malebranche goes on to expound the thesis that the actual world is the best of all possible worlds in a way that shows that he does not accept it at all in its Leibnizian form. He continues to insist, as in his published works, that the actual world is the best, not absolutely, but relative to God's ways. Indeed, in response, Leibniz has to remind Malebranche that for him, simplicity of ways is not a side constraint on God's production of the best of all possible worlds, but rather one of the criteria for evaluating their perfection. It may still be objected that Leibniz's correction of Malebranche on this point is consistent with viewing his theodicy as a set of variations on a Malebranchian theme. But this, I think, would be a mistake. For Leibniz's insistence that the actual world is the best possible world in an absolute sense is symptomatic of his deep commitment to the Platonic tradition. As Plato writes in the Timaeus, the highest can produce nothing but the best. Leibniz's commitment to Platonism, or perhaps better, Neoplatonism, also helps to explain why he has room for theodicy in the narrow sense, whereas Malebranche does not. The claim that arguably Malebranche does not have a theodicy in the narrow sense of the term is liable to misunderstanding. The point is not, of course, that Malebranche is prepared to concede that God is unjust in his treatment of individual human beings. It is rather that the issue does not really arise for him as a philosophical problem. To see the force of the point, consider how Don Rutherford sets up the issue of theodicy in his contribution to the Cambridge Companion to Malebranche. Don writes, and he's not a million miles away, quote, "If God is all-powerful, all-wise, and all-good, why does he permit natural circumstances, floods, earthquakes, and drought, that are unworthy of his perfection and that bring harm to human beings, particularly the innocent who have done nothing to earn God's punishment? Why does God allow wicked people to exercise their wickedness in harming the innocent and then apparently fail to punish the wicked who profit from their evil deeds? Questions such as these strike at the fundamental justice of God's action. How could God allow such things to happen unless he is in some way limited by less than supreme goodness, knowledge, or power?" Unquote. Rutherford here introduces the reader to the issue of theodicy by means of the standard hard cases that intrigue us today and that we tend to emphasize when explaining the problem of evil to students. Not surprisingly, it would seem, he cites the suffering endured by the innocent as a result of natural disasters and the wickedness of fellow human beings. But however naturally these cases arise when we think of the problem of theodicy, they are curiously irrelevant to Malebranche's project. Indeed, Rutherford, in effect, acknowledges this point in the body of his article. Readers of Malebranche can scarcely fail to notice that he dwells on a narrow range of cases where the natural order, as opposed to the order of grace, is concerned. He is obsessed by the fact that rain often falls on oceans and sterile ground where it can do no good, and that there exist many cases of mutants or monsters. Both these kinds of cases are relevant either directly or indirectly to human flourishing, but that is not really Malebranche's concern. What drives Malebranche's theodicy is the thesis that God acts solely for the sake of his own glory. To defend this thesis, Malebranche seeks to show that his ways honor and glorify him, and this in turn involves vindicating the orderliness of the divine ways. According to Malebranche, the existence of monsters in the world does not entail that God ever acts contrary to principles of order. The fact that one of Malebranche's hand-picked examples to which he returns almost obsessively is the existence of monsters makes him easy to misunderstand in this respect. We might lazily suppose that Malebranche is interested in the apparent problem for divine justice posed by the suffering of such grotesquely deformed human beings as the elephant man. But in fact, careful attention to the text shows that Malebranche has little or no interest in this issue at all. Treatise of Nature and Grace 118 is a bit of a counterexample. He is not much interested in how it might feel to be the elephant man, or in any sense of grievance that he may have against his creator. Tad Schmaltz says, well, Malebranche had some experience of what it was like to be deformed because he had curvature of the spine, But if you look at portraits of Malebranche, he's a pretty good-looking guy, and he's tall, and I don't think he was, I think it was a very minor problem myself. For Malebranche, the Elephant Man is not a case of an innocent man being wronged, for the simple reason that the Elephant Man is not innocent, however blameless and admirable his actions may be. Malebranche is obsessed, as few post-medieval philosophers have been, by the fall and the corruption of human nature by original sin. According to a striking passage in the Dialogues on Metaphysics, the human mind has lost its dignity and excellence before God. Malebranche's constant appeals to the fall and to its associated corruption are vivid illustrations of the methodological principle that one cannot philosophize accurately without the aid of faith. Interestingly, the issue of divine justice in the narrow sense arises in one place in Malebranche's philosophy where one might not expect it. It arises in connection with the status of animals. Malebranche is perhaps even more dogmatic than Descartes in his commitment to the beast-machine doctrine. And not surprisingly, he favors theological arguments for it that have no precedent in Descartes. One such argument turns on the Augustinian principle that under a just God, no innocent creature is wretched. I'll skip the quotation. The argument goes as follows. Animals are innocent, God is just. If animals are innocent, then if God is just, animals do not suffer pain, therefore animals do not suffer pain. It is, of course, a further step to the conclusion that animals are mere machines. By contrast, Malebranche does not accept the parallel argument concerning, say, small children, since he simply denies the first premise. It may be objected that my treatment of Malebranche's Theodicy is curiously one-sided, for it ignores his concern with the distribution of divine grace. Here, it may be said, Malebranche certainly shows himself to be interested in vindicating divine justice towards individual human beings. But this objection is misguided. First, it is the nature of divine grace, of course, that it is not something that is deserved by sinners. If God gives some human beings insufficient grace to save them, they have no grounds for complaining of injustice. Secondly, as in his discussion of the realm of nature, Malebranche's main aim is to vindicate God by showing that his glory requires him to act through general laws. It is divine order, not justice in the usual sense, that is the focus of the discussion. This, of course, is not the whole story about Malebranche's aims in his treatment of grace. He is also engaged in offering an ingenious solution to the problem of reconciling the scriptural claim that God wills to save all men with the uncontroversial truth that not all men are saved. But it is no real part of Malebranche's purpose in his discussion of grace to solve a problem concerning divine justice towards individuals. Leibniz, like Malebranche, takes the issue of divine order very seriously. Indeed, he claims, perhaps unfairly, that he goes further than Malebranche in seeking to vindicate God's ways by holding that even miracles are governed by order. Some commentators have even argued that Leibniz's Theodicy is in effect constituted wholly by the defense of the variety-simplicity criterion. Such a claim can hardly be accepted in view of Leibniz's insistence in the Theodicy that the happiness of intelligent creatures is God's principal goal in creation. This insistence is perhaps even more pronounced in the Discourse on Metaphysics. However that may be, our present concern is with the differences between what we might call Leibnizian and Malebranchian anthropology. We've seen that the doctrine of the fall is at the heart of Malebranche's vision of human nature, and that for this reason, the issue of divine justice towards individual human beings hardly arises for him as a philosophical problem. It's tempting to say that for methodological reasons, the doctrine of the fall can hardly be central to Leibniz's Theodicy, for unlike Malebranche, he is disinclined to appeal to dogmas of revealed theology in order to solve philosophical problems. The Theodicy, of course, moves freely between natural and revealed theology in a way that's rather disconcerting and uncharacteristic of Leibniz. But even here, Leibniz seems more intent on appealing to philosophical resources to solve problems in revealed theology than into revealed theology to solve problems in philosophy. In a work such as the Theodicy, Leibniz can hardly avoid discussing the fall. In the preface, Leibniz underlines the importance of the Christian dogma by singling out original sin as one of the doctrines theologians have added to controversies in philosophical theology. What is striking about the Theodicy, however, is that Leibniz seems to show some embarrassment in his treatment of these issues. Leibniz is happy to discuss some of the issues that the fall raises, problems about God's foreknowledge of Adam